All right, we ready to tackle this? Ecclesiastes? Anybody ever been in a study of Ecclesiastes specifically? Not necessarily a sermon series, but an actual study of it? I'm going to get my clock so I don't talk too long. Is that close enough? Yeah. You will? I appreciate that. I'm hoping Sunday I'll get to slow down a little bit, just deal with the Emmaus boys and be done. Man, the last two Sundays I felt like I was talking about 90 miles an hour. So, and I was still over on both times. So, all right, Ecclesiastes. Let's be real clear on this, and let's understand the genre that we're dealing with. All right. Obviously, when we're dealing with 2 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, we're dealing with a letter. All right. So we have an author, we have an audience, we have a situation, we have all these things. In Ecclesiastes, it is not a letter, it's not a gospel, it's not a biography, it's not any of these things. It's what? How would any of you or all of you describe what Ecclesiastes is? Or if you're just sitting here going, you're supposed to tell us. How would you describe the genre of Ecclesiastes? Poem? Okay. Similar to Proverbs?
An old dude reflecting on his life.
An old dude reflecting on his life. Yeah. An old dude writing poetry with some catchy phrases in it. Is that the genre? I don't know if that's a specific genre or not. It's interesting, I was hoping to get an answer from the commentaries that I read, and it was sort of all of the above. It is what seems to be an old dude, and he is reflecting upon his life, a very interesting life, all right? And that may not be always good, okay? It's kind of that you ask somebody about their college years, and it's like, ooh, I can tell you some of it, but I definitely can't tell you all of it, okay? But he is reflecting. He does use a lot of poetry, okay? So we need to understand that very clearly. It is a poetic verse, but it also weaves proverbs and sayings into it, all right? So I don't think you can completely say it's one thing or the other. It's sort of an amalgamation of all these things. So you take Proverbs, and you take Song of Solomon, and kind of mash them together, and poof, you get Ecclesiastes, okay? So we have to read it as such, okay? Now, also when you read poetry, do you read the first stanza or the first piece of a poem, especially a 13-part, at least 13 parts? Do you read the first part and go, oh, well, I understand that completely. I understand the totality of everything he's trying to say from just this one. Does each stanza make absolute sense individually? No. You got to stick around. You got to stick around because he's building up to something. He's trying to make a point. And so it may get a little frustrating at times. It may get a little bit, okay, where are we going with this thing? Which is an excellent question when you read through Ecclesiastes. Because after a while you're going, man, this guy, he just needs to go see a psychiatrist or something, but it works out in the end, okay? And so it'll all come together around Christmas time. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So we'll fight through it week to week, and we'll go, man, this guy's got some interesting thoughts and some really depressing thoughts and a little scary at times and a little like, whoa, he went there. He said that out loud, okay? So just stick with it. Continue to kind of just process as he's talking. We'll see where we end up, okay? So verse 1:1. The words, and I'm gonna use a little bit of Hebrew. Man, I'm horrible at Hebrew. I barely know the alphabet of the Hebrew. I probably couldn't, I know I can't tell you the alphabet, go through the ABCs of the Hebrew language. I know a few words in Hebrew. I'm not very good at that, and I don't even claim to be. Trust me, I barely skated out of Hebrew in seminary. I remember I went in and they said, if you have a certain grade, you don't have to take the final. And I was like, oh, please, Jesus, let me have a D so I can get out of this class, whatever. I always say D is for diploma, all right? And I went in and she said, well, you have a low C, but I think you can bring it up to a B. I said, nope. I'm out of here. C is good enough for me. I am done. It's just, I want to say there's 6 times as many different, distinct words in the Hebrew vocabulary of the Bible than there are Greek words in the New Testament. Okay? So for every one word in the Greek New Testament, there are 6 distinct words. So it's almost just way too many words to describe all this. So it's just hard. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you Hebrew words, but I'll also come back and say, okay, the Septuagint translates it with this Greek word, and this means this, okay? And Septuagint, very quickly, is the Old Testament dispersed, the Hebrew Old Testament dispersed among 70 scholars around 200 BC, okay, so 200 years before Christ. The Hebrew Old Testament given to all these, they went home, went to all over parts of the Mediterranean, Egypt, Europe, all these, Greece. They went to their places, translated into the best Greek they had, came back together, and legend has it that when they came together, it was exactly the same copy of all 70 of them. Okay? Now, I would take that very much as legend. I would not take that as fact, but it was sufficient enough to where we have what's called the Septuagint. And if you ever see a little marking, it's LXX, 70, okay? So if you ever see 70 says this or LXX says this, it's saying the Greek translation is this, okay? So like I said, I'll use those words because that I'm familiar with. That I can do okay with. And so hopefully we can clear up some of the words. But I'm not going to try and make sense of all this. I just want to explain phrase by phrase kind of what he's trying to say. Everybody with me? Okay, I'm trying to lower expectations as low as I can get them for this first week. So, the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Okay? Now, the words in the Septuagint, this is the word the rhema or the rhemata, which is sort of the noun form of rhema or the declaration, or the declarations. Logos would be the other way to translate this, but it's not logos here, it's rhema, which means a declaration. Logos is just sort of a bland word for words. Rhema is something I'm declaring to everyone. So the teacher, the Koheleth in Hebrew, or the Ecclesiastes of the New Testament. Ecclesiastes comes from the word, we get our word church from this. So it's the sort of the one who is the main called out one, is the way this would be translated. The church is the ecclesia, the called out ones. And so this is the one who is over the called out ones, okay? Son of David, king in Jerusalem. And tradition tells us who wrote Ecclesiastes. Solomon, okay? Now, do we know that for sure? No. Do we need to know that for sure? No. Because at no point does it say, well, if it's because it was Solomon, we know this, this, and this. Best guess is yes, it was Solomon, obviously son of David. Obviously, he was the king in Jerusalem, all right? After Solomon's reign, what happens to the kingdom? We have this divided, all right? So the northern kingdom of Israel would move away from Jerusalem. So if it wasn't Solomon, then it would be one of the other kings from Judah. But again, seems Solomon-esque. We'll see the language very easily, okay? All right, 2. The sunny side of this thing. Absolute futility, says the teacher, the Koheleth, the Ecclesia. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. Okay? Everybody feeling pretty good so far? All right, this is the summary sentence of the entire poem. Okay, so as he's starting off, he has an actual little poem that's set out, and he's going to start with this summary statement. Now, you may have a different word. Futile is the way or futility, absolute futility, everything is futile. What word do you have? Vanity of vanities, okay? I'm not a big fan of that because in our mind, vanity speaks what? Yeah, something that's vain. It's sort of, it's got a little personality to it. This is not it has a personality. We're not talking about everything is vain. Everybody thinks of themselves. All right? No. Vanity would come from the idea that has no worth to it. All right? And this is what it says. A good translation of this would be vapor. Okay? Think about when you're driving down the road and it's hot outside and you see the little water stuff on the road and you get up to it and it's not there. It was never there. Or if you're driving when it's just rained and it's hot outside, and what happens to all the rain or the steam? The steam comes up. This is sort of a picture of what he's talking about. So when he says absolute futility, and these are all double words, it's using the same word over. Hebel, Hebel. Hebel, Hebel. Or Matthias, Matthias. All right? And so this double phrase in this simply sort of accentuates it. Okay? So it's absolute futility, absolute futility. Everything is futile. It's meaningless. It's empty. Everything is. So what do you do with that? What's he trying to say? Life is absolutely meaningless? There's absolutely no meaning in life whatsoever? I think what he's going to say, and he's going to sort of establish this, is don't think you're going to change everything. You are not going to go, oh, well, Hunter's here, and because Hunter is here and he moved this rock, the whole world is different now. And it wasn't the way it was when we started. Now, again, you should be feeling a little pushback on that. You think, well, does that mean nothing I do matters? No. Don't go there, okay? That's what you got to be careful of when you read through Ecclesiastes. Don't think nothing I do matters. Think nothing I do is going to ultimately change the universe as a whole, and the whole direction of the universe is going to be different. Because how many of us do things on a daily basis that change major, major ways in people's lives, but yet, the sun comes up tomorrow, same way it did yesterday, okay? So think macro, all right? Don't think micro futility. Everybody okay with that? Okay, I want to make sure we don't, like I said, if you're in any way suicidal, don't come to Ecclesiastes Bible study, okay? Because then you'll be like, oh, that's it, never mind. There's no hope, I'm out, all right? We'll be giving out Xanax in the lobby if you need it. Okay, so he's going to illustrate this. What does a man gain or profit for all of his efforts that he labors at under the sun? And again, we have a double word. When we said futility, futility, vanity of vanities, hebel, hebel, all right? This, he uses the word amal, or moiktoi is the Greek word here. But it's just, if you labor at laboring, what does it really profit you, all the labor with which you labor? Because what are you going to do? You're going to make all this money, and then you're going to do what? Shane, you're going to make all this money selling barbecue, and then you're going to hand it to Catherine. What good is that? All right? And then Catherine's going to marry some amazing, incredible, rich guy, and then she's just going to blow it on shoes. All right? And all this is just going to be, what's the point? Okay? Again, macro, did we change the world? No. Micro? Yeah. But macro, we don't. So he's making the point that what's the profit, what's the gain if we labor for labor's sake? And all these things. And here's a phrase he uses 27 times in Ecclesiastes, is this idea of under the sun. Okay? Now there's under the sun, and 4 times, he uses the phrase, check that. 3 times, he uses the phrase under heaven. Okay? Now, I want you to see a little bit of a variation between those things. There are some things that are done under the sun, and there are some things that are done under heaven. Under the sun is just very much a secular worldview. I labor, I work, and I work under the sun. There are some things that we do, there are some things that are done under heaven in the view of God. Okay? So one kind of has this, God's not a factor in this, and one, God is very much a factor. So when he says under the sun, and again, don't think atheistic as this, I don't believe in God. No, it's just sort of a secular vision. Okay? All right. Verse 4. A generation goes, all right, or walks on, and a generation comes, walks in, but the earth remains forever. It's the same. How many generations have we had come and go? And basically the world still works in the same way. Again, micro changes, absolutely, but macro, no. And so he's saying, you know what? My father died. I came on the scene. Still pretty much the same thing going on here, all right? And this, he's always playing back in this futility. Everything's futile. Nothing is a macro change. 5, the sun rises and the sun sets. Is that similar to the language in verse 4? A generation comes and a generation goes. Nothing changes. The sun rises, the sun sets. The language in the Hebrew is very, very similar to the generation coming and the sun rising and the sun setting, a generation going. This is interesting. I like the way he kind of illustrates this. The sun rises and the sun sets, panting, it returns, and that's not in the text, but he's kind of added this to make it make sense. Panting, it returns to its place where it rises. Okay? Now, Meredith, you do a lot of theater here. So if you've got somebody and they're in one scene and they have to come off of this scene and then they have to change clothes and magically come back into the scene 2 minutes later in a whole different costume, or if you don't have enough people and so you get to be tree number 1 and then all of a sudden you're an angel in the next scene, but you're changing clothes and coming back around. This is kind of the way he illustrates the sun. That the sun comes up in the east and it goes over and it sets in the west and it runs as fast as it can back over here, all right? And it's, oh, here we go again. And it runs back over there, right? If you think about this in a philosophical sense, what's the point? I mean, really, what's the point of this? It's just going to keep doing this thing, and it runs back, and it runs back. And so as Solomon, or the teacher, is observing these things, he's saying, okay, nothing changes. It's just the same thing over and over. The generation comes. This person lives, and then this person dies. Well, another person, they have grandchildren, and now they come on here, and then they die off, and well, now there's more grandchildren. There's always sort of this continuing returning and starting over. And so he looks at this, and he goes, this is like the hamster wheel. What's the point? Everything is futile. Okay? And again, he's looking at it from this big picture scale. All right? Don't get sucked into the, well, everything's meaningless. And nothing I do matters. Don't get sucked into that. All right? He's going to do the wind here. 6. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning. The Greek is actually kuklos, which means circling. The wind just kind of goes in circles. Sometimes it goes to the north, sometimes to the south. It circles. And it goes the wind, and then the wind returns in its cycles. All right? Every year, around this time of year, what happens? A butterfly flaps his wings off the coast of Africa, and all of a sudden, what happens in Houston? Billions of dollars of damage. Why? Because the wind returns to its cycles. All right? It's the same thing. And he's saying, the generations do this, the sun does this, the wind does this, the currents do. I mean, it's just a continuous, and his observations are, what's the point? And again, be careful because we're in the opening salvo here, okay? He's trying to lay down the groundwork, right? 7, one more thing, the streams. All the streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. The streams are flowing to the place, and they return. Literally, it should use the word return here. It's a better translation. And they return there again. Has anyone ever thought that was weird? You ever been to the point, the original point of the Mississippi River up in Minnesota? Anybody ever been there before? I haven't either. I'm just curious because I was driving over the Mississippi, and I was like, hey, that's a big river. I wonder where all that water comes from. And how long has that been full of water? I mean, when is this thing going to run out? You ever been to Niagara Falls? When's that thing going to run out? That's a lot of water going over that thing. Where in the world? And this is what he's observing. It's like the fish pond. You're like, wow, I have this cool waterfall. Well, eventually all the water should be in the bottom. No, but what's going on? God's designed it where it's this cycle. And he says, this whole thing, the generations, the sun, the wind, the streams, this is futile. Everything's futile. Nothing's going to change. The sun's not going to change. The generations are not going to change. The streams are not going to change. The wind is not going to change. Everything's futile. Everything is meaningless. Verse 8, all things, and the Greek here is logos, so all words, right? All words are wearisome. Kopos in the Greek. It means sort of painful, hurtful, all right? And man is unable to speak them. The eye, and I'm not sure what you can do with that, to be real honest, okay? The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled, and that word filled is like you fill up a cup or fill up something, so you go, oh, no, thanks, I'm full, all right? Somebody says to you, hey, tell me when, and what do you say, Bobby? Huh? If a waitress comes along and she says, hey, here, I'm going to refill your drink, tell me when, and she pours until you say what? Do you say when? What's wrong with him? Hunter, you say when, right? All right. It's a dad joke, all right? You say when, right? All right. That's the implication here. The ear is not filled. Is fullness the goal of seeing? Do I see and go, all right, my eyes are full. Can't take any more. No. And so, and same thing with the ears. The ears aren't going, I'll listen until I'm full. Okay. I can't fit any more words into my ear. Okay? Now, after about an hour, y'all are going, I'm full. I'm full. You can stop talking now. I get that. That's a whole different point. Okay? But what he's saying is this. There's this idea that nothing's going to be filled up to the point where we go, all right, we can move on now. Why? Because you see things, and then what? Your eye is still going, show me some more. Your ear doesn't ever go, I can't hear anything anymore. It's full. My ears are full. I can't hear any more words. No, your ear does this. Your eye does this. He's saying everything needs more. Everything wants more. It's always moving for more, 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 more. All right? Verse 9, what has been is what will be, or what became is what will be, and what has been done, all right, is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. All right, see him use that phrase, that under the sun? Again, 27 times he's going to use this. There's nothing new in our physical, material world. It's all the same thing. Just generation come, generation go. Sun rises, sun sets. Streams flow, keep flowing. They just keep flowing. And if you're sitting back and you're looking at all this, what's your conclusion? Am I really changing anything? Am I really making an impact? So as hard as I could possibly work, am I ever going to stop the sun from doing this? Am I ever going to stop the streams? Is the eye ever going to go, oh man, that was such an incredible piece of artwork. I can't ever see anything ever again because you filled my eyes. All right? I don't care how romantic you are, Tyler. You will never fill the ears of Emily with your good poetry. All right? She'll never go, I can't handle anymore. All right? It's just never going to happen. Right, Hunter? That's right. That's what I'm trying to say. All right? It's absolute futility for you to try to stop the world from turning. And this is what he's trying to do. Now, what kind of person sits around and thinks like this? If you're doing the 9 to 5, are you sitting around thinking about this stuff? What kind of person thinks like this? How did it start? Son of David, king in Jerusalem. All right? Who's doing what all day long? Working hard. I don't know how true this is because it was on talk radio this morning, but they said Queen Elizabeth has been making 98 million pounds a year. during her reign. I'm like, what's she doing with I mean, she's got everything she wants brought to her, literally hand and foot. Who's paying her a salary of 98 million pounds a year? Now, my guess is that's kind of what it costs. It's budgeted for her care, which is still, oh my goodness, because pounds are like, aren't they more than, I don't know what that would equate to. But it's an insane amount of money, all right? And what's she doing all day? I'm like, you know, I'm all for all that pomp and circumstance and all that stuff, but I'm like, seriously, what's this lady been doing for the last 70 years? Being queen. I'm like, what's Charles going to do? Sit there. I'm like, I just want somebody to get on the throne and go, okay, we're changing things. We're doing this. Here's what we're going to do from now on. At least do something to earn your money. But again, who thinks like this? Somebody who has a lot of time on their hands. The story of Muhammad, the prophet Muhammad, was that he was a young man and he married an older noble woman. And so he had all this time on his hands to start seeing visions and dreaming dreams and all this stuff. And so what comes out of this is the Quran, that he has all this time on his hands. And the Ecclesiastes, this is what he's doing. All right, keep going. 10. Can one say about anything, look, this is new? All right? And again, you can probably get in there and go, yeah, this is new. We've never seen this before. All right? Darwin goes to the Galapagos. Does he see anything new? It's new to him, but is it new? No. God didn't go, oh, I'm going to put something brand new here. Okay? No. God made it a long time ago. It's just there. All right? It has already existed in the ages before us. 11. There is no remembrance. This is interesting. I want y'all's take on this verse. There is no remembrance of those who came before and of those who will come after. There will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. Okay? So this idea, there is no remembrance of those who came before, none of those who will come after, and then no remembrance of those who will come after those. So it's a progression. Did y'all see that? So we don't remember what happened before. We don't have any remembrance of what's going to happen after. And we definitely don't have any remembrance of what's going to happen after that. What's he trying to say? How many of us think multi-generational? How many of us think multi-week? How many of us are like, if I can get through today, I'm good. What does Jesus say? Don't worry about tomorrow. He's got enough trouble, all right? So don't worry about multi-generation. And he's saying this, there is no remembrance. So we all think very self-centered, don't we? All right? I mean, somebody asked me when I wanted to have grandkids. I'm like, oh, Lord, I just want to get these kids out of college. Give me 3-4 years, I'll get them out of college. I'm not even thinking grandkids. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, theoretically, we're 5 to 10 years away from having grandkids. I'm talking 5 to 10 years. That's not a long span of time, right? But it's not even in my scope of thinking. How many of you remember what it was like before you had kids, parents? You remember it? You do remember it? I'm like, I have no recollection of what it was like before we had kids. I don't. I'm just like glad they're out of the house, all right? Get my life back and starting to actually sit around and go, wow, this is like weird, all right? But that was 20 years ago, all right? And so to me, I think there is the naivete of the one who is striving. That we don't think multi-generationally. We think very small time frames. We think, let's get through this season. Let's get through this season. Let's get through this season. So there's no remembrance of things. So no one actually reflects. So the one who can and is afforded the ability to sit back and think multi-generationally and big picture and sitting around going, wow, the sun all day long. Wow. And you can sit around for 6 months and do this. go, you know what? I don't think this really means anything. Well, the other guy's over here making horseshoes and stuff, right, Jamie? All right? And he ain't sitting there going, wow. All right? He's going, I got to get this horse. I got to get home. I got to buy some bread and milk, and I got to take care of this. There's a very small time frame. But this guy looks at big picture. And he says, these people that walk around doing this day-to-day kind of a thing, there's a naivete to it. And the ignorance is what? Bliss. It's kind of what the conclusion he's going to come to here. Because I'm sitting here with all this time to watch all this, and I am miserable. And I look at it and go, everything's futile. Because he's doing this, and he's not looking here. All right? And I love what he's going to come to is what? This is pretty cool. Why don't you just live in this? Don't go to the everything is futile kind of thing. All right? That's into the chapters, into the poem. Sorry if I gave that away. So y'all can read. It's only 13 chapters. It'll only take you about 30 minutes to read this thing. So, all right. All right. So this is his opening salvo, his opening poem. All right. It's like the pastor starting his sermon with a joke or with a poem. He says, I'm here to teach you about this. Let me read you a piece from Shakespeare. Okay. This is his opening salvo. It's kind of setting up what he's established, how he's thinking, and now he's going to step into his message and into the meat of everything. So in 12, it says, I, the teacher, the Ecclesiastes, all right, or the Koheleth, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. A lot of people jump on this one and they go, okay, son of David over Israel in Jerusalem. You put those three qualifications together, and the only person that it would make sense is Solomon. But again, he's never named. Some people get weird about this. I'm like, it's a dude, okay? 13. Check my word on this. I applied my mind. You may have different. Set my heart. What else? Devoted. All right. It's the word for give. Natan in Hebrew. If you know anyone named Nathan, all right, that their name in Hebrew means gift. The Natan, Nathan, didomi in the Greek. It means I gave my heart, my cardia, all right, or my leb in the Hebrew. I gave my heart and my mind. Now, how much of that? When you say I give my heart to something, all right, hopefully at some point you married folks, you said you gave your heart to something or someone, okay? That's kind of what he's implying. This is not, I thought about this for a little bit. No, you understand the devotion, and that's why I like the word devoted, okay? Devoted is a good word because you're giving your heart to this. To seek and explore, all right? Not just seek things out, zeteo, but I wanted to explore this. There's a depth to that word. To seek and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. Did you see the different word there? Okay, so what did I say? Under the sun is secular, just secular, all right? This is, I gave my heart to seek and explore through wisdom, that's the lens, what is done in all of God's creation, under God's heavens, all right? And it's taka shamayim, all right? God has given, same word, given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. Again, what's he looking? He's looking at this from his ivory tower and going, look at all the people running around. They're just doing and doing and doing and doing. And he sees it how? It is a miserable task. All right? It's literally poneros. All right? It's poneros is evil. Okay? And so he in the Greek, he describes it as something that's evil. It's ra in the Hebrew, which is the word evil. All right? It is an evil cumbrance. Think the story of Mary and Martha. Mary comes and does what? Where does she sit? At the feet of Jesus. While Martha does what? Her cumbersome tasks. Same word right here. So this is an evil cumbrance. So Solomon, tell me what you really think. Tell me what you really think about what God has given people. He looks at this and it's everything's futile, everything's futile. And God has given us this miserable task to do what? To keep us what? In the Septuagint, he repeats the word cumbrance, to keep us encumbered. This cumbrance that keeps us encumbered. So we just keep doing this thing, and we don't even know how miserable we should be. And Solomon, being the rich guy sitting in his ivory tower, can sit back and look at all this, while the average person does what? There's a naivete to it, isn't it? I'm just doing my thing. I'm just doing my thing and just make enough money, getting bread and milk, coming home, raising kids, all right? Doing all these things. But again, you look at Solomon, and he's sitting in his ivory tower, and he doesn't experience all this, right? Now, can you weave into here a little bit of Solomon's life experience? Where would his joy come from? His 698th wife? 297th concubine? Good night. How many kids do you have at this point? What job? What can he say that he's done at work? You see, there comes this time. And that's why I kind of relate this back to sort of the Queen Elizabeth. I'm like, what's she going to look back and say she accomplished? And I don't know. I mean, you may have some amazing list of things. Oh, she did this and this and this. I'm like, all I've seen for the last 50 years is her just sitting there with a crown on her head every now and then and waving. And I mean, I haven't seen anything. And so I wonder where he would find his joy. So when he looks at the people, the little ants running around, scurrying around, he goes, what a miserable task God has given them to keep them occupied. This is why he starts with everything's futile. It's a very secularist, humanistic vantage point that he's seeing. 14. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun, and have found everything to be futile. Kind of bookends this thing. It's all a pursuit of the wind. Right? He'll use that phrase, I can't remember how many times, but he'll use it twice here. This pursuit of the wind, which means what? You're chasing the wind. You're just, it's meaningless, absolutely meaningless, absolutely futile. Hevel, all right? He throws a little proverb in here. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted, all right? Why do you want to straighten what's crooked? Are you really going to fix it? Kind of a Humpty Dumpty kind of a thing? You can't fix it. Once it's broken, all right? You can't count that which is lacking. If your piggy bank is empty, what are you going to count? So again, this guy's really depressed, isn't he? This guy's just like, what's the point? What's the point of any of this? And again, the ivory tower lends itself to that kind of attitude. I said to myself, 16, I said to myself, and when you're rich and sitting in your ivory towers, can you talk to yourself? Yeah. Because does anybody else really listen to you and argue with you? Question you? Make you go, seriously, dude, you need to get over yourself. Just go make yourself a sandwich. Make somebody else a sandwich. See how happy they are. You'll feel much better at the end of this thing, all right? So I said to myself, because I'm thinking to myself, because I'm so smart and everybody else is not as smart as me, look, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me. It's an interesting word that uses. It literally means in front of my face. So it doesn't necessarily mean David and Saul and Samuel and all the judges before, prior to me. It means it should carry the idea of what's in front of my face. So I'm smarter than everybody that will come before my face. And what does that lend itself to when you know you're wiser, smarter, more knowledgeable than everybody else in your little realm? That's a scary place. Don't get in that place where you're the smartest person in the room, okay? Because when you're the smartest person in the room, it's just going to lend your arrogance, all right? You need to have somebody that can question you, somebody that can challenge you, somebody that can dare you, all right? And somebody that can go, what about this? What about this? And evidently Solomon doesn't have that person, because he says, my wisdom is far beyond those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? Thoroughly grasped. I've got my head around everything. I always love G.K. Chesterton's quote in it's a book called Orthodoxy. And he said, it's not the artists and the poets that go insane. It's the mathematicians and the accountants. He says, because the mathematician and the accountant tries to get their head around numbers. And they try to get their head around God. They try and fit God into this formulistic thing. So if you're very numbers oriented and you like everything to line up and be succinct, and you get your head around it, you're the one that's going to go insane. The poet is the one who just looks up at God and goes, that's amazing. And they don't try and get their head around God. They just go, wow, that's awesome. All right? So that's why when I read that, this thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I've got my head around all this. Yeah, sure you do. All right? 17, I applied my mind to know wisdom. And I don't like the way they translate this. I'm not a big fan of it. It's to know wisdom and to know madness. So yours may say wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. Is our translation? If you have a Holman, it's two nominative verbs here. I want to know wisdom, and I want to know madness. You may have a different word for that, for madness. So wisdom, knowledge, madness, folly. What's madness in your translation? You may have different? Madness? Okay. It's the Greek word parabole. I want to know parables. What's a parable? It's almost like a riddle, isn't it? In some form. Everybody with me? Yes or no? I want to know, when you say, a man went out into his field and he planted wheat, and the enemy came in and sowed, weeds in it. That's madness. How is that madness? It's not madness as in the thought of, well, you're just crazy, compared to wisdom. I want to know wisdom, and I want to know how to be able to think through riddles. That's what I've applied my mind to, okay? Obviously, he doesn't have a 9-to-5 job, right? Because he's sitting around thinking all the time, okay? I want to know wisdom, and I want to know madness, and I also want to know folly. Saul is described on numerous occasions as being a man of folly. Everybody with me? King Saul, all right? Anybody think of any times where he just screwed up royally? And Samuel came to him and said, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Why did you do that? That was folly. This is how Saul is described. And Solomon wants to know, I want to understand what it's like to be an idiot. All right? Because if I can understand what it means, what it's like for you to be an idiot, then I'll understand that as well. He really has this all-consuming desire to know these things. I want to know wisdom. I want to know parables and riddles, and I want to be able to think through these things. And I also want to know what it's like to be dumb like Saul was. Right? I want to understand. He just wants to give it. It says, I learned that this too, wanting to know all these things, at the end of the day, what's going to happen to the son? If I gain all this wisdom, I gain all this understanding of riddles, if I gain all this understanding of being an idiot, what's going to happen with the sun tomorrow? What's going to happen to the streams? What's going to happen to the generations? I'm still going to die. Kid's going to come up behind me. All right? My eyes are never going to get full or satisfied and go, that's it. I don't need to see anything else. My ears never going to get full. So therefore, everything that I could ever do is what? Meaningless. Futile. And this is where he gets that word vanity. Vain as in vain, there's no weight to it, no substance to it. Okay? Does everybody make sure? I want to make sure, because a lot of people get confused on that vanity. Don't think a mirror with lights around it. Okay? Just think an empty bucket. All of this I chase after. 18, last one. For with much, or it's the Greek word plethos. We get a word plethora. For with a plethora of wisdom is a plethora of sorrows. As knowledge increases, all right, it's added to, my grief will increase. So the more I sit around and think about all this, and the wiser I get, and the more I understand how the sun does this, and the streams do this, and the generations do this, and the winds do this, what happens to his attitude? What happens to his demeanor? Worse and worse and worse. Because why? What's the conclusion he draws? Nothing changes the macro. Right? And that's where you got to ask yourself, is that your ambition? Are you trying to change? Are you trying to stop the sun? Is what you're doing today, I'm stopping the sun today. That's it, man. That wind will cease after I say these words, speak these things, do this task. No. And what's the conclusion he draws because he has this sort of macro mindset? What's the point? What's the point of any of it? And what's he and to call it a evil or a miserable encumbrance to live this life day after day until the day you die. What's he going to miss out on? Yeah, the little moments, the micro. And that's what he's going to come to, okay? So as we start this off, like I said, this is just the opening lines. He's setting the stage. So it's a pretty good poem, right? Because at the beginning of this, what are you experiencing if this was somebody was on stage and they were reading this out loud? You look at the character, this main character, this teacher, and what are you thinking? How does he make you feel? How does this character make you feel at this point in the production? Depressed? Does anybody feel sad for him? Yeah. Is anybody going, oh, but he's going to figure it out. I know he's going to figure it out. And it's going to be so awesome when he comes full circle in this thing. And again, that's what good poetry does, right? It draws you in. It makes you experience what this person is experiencing. And it'll weave in some romance, and it'll weave in some sorrow and some death and some life. And at the end of it, you're going, that was a good movie. All right? And hopefully that's what we'll get to right before Christmas. All right? Does anybody have any questions? That was not thoroughly exciting enough. All right, come back at it next week. All right? Yeah, and be more happy. I don't know. We will get a little song in chapter 3. So if you want to sing for us, Jeannie, you're welcome. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe this is the one. No. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, I really hope Song of Solomon was about his first wife. I hope that was the occasion. Yeah. So, all right. So y'all come back for next week and we'll tell everybody how awesome this was, how exciting this was, how you just have a vision of Jesus now. That's the interesting thing. Where does God come into play? God's almost the bad guy in this first scene, isn't he? All right. Well, that'll come full circle. All right. Let's pray. Father, I can't thank you for the poem yet because we haven't got to the good part yet. But I thank you that your word will not return void. And I thank you that you have a purpose in this, that you're painting a picture. I pray that we would find some identity with the teacher. I pray that we would see our frustrations and his frustrations, and that we would come to conclusions and come to these beautiful, simplistic conclusions that he comes to in the end. So, Father, keep walking us through it. Keep our minds sharp. May your Holy Spirit speak beautiful truths to us through this poem, this proverb-filled poem, that we can know you better and know how much you love us and how much you have created us to do amazing things, even if they're just simple. I'm going to pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.